know. And yeah, so here we go. We're waiting for the all clear. What a wonderful thing to be doing. Nice and early in the morning. All right, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down the security rabbit hole to yet another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Hey, it's Raph, and I've got a friend with me today. We're going to talk about. We just discussed as before we got on. It's like it's going to be a Seinfeld episode. It's an episode about nothing, but it'll be the best one we've had. Because Dave and I get together every time
It's because
over
you
dinner.
invited me on. It's bound to be the best.
It's bound to be the best, right? We have dinner every once in a while, and it's like like a 45-minute dinner that turns into like a 5-hour conversation. It's just
Exactly.
always awesome, and I always regret not recording it. Well, actually, there's a couple of times I'm glad we didn't record it, but that's besides the point.
Yeah. Well, and the best part is,
All right, so
we walk away, and you have action items, and I just go home.
yeah, that's true. All right, without further ado, welcome to the show, Mr. David Barton. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I appreciate the invite to join you in your podcast community.
In my quest to go down the rabbit hole, yes.
Right.
All right, so hey, tell the little world out there, because you and I have known each other for a while, and I can recall most of your illustrious career, but tell the good people at home what you're doing these days, Dave.
Well, at least you didn't say infamous, because that has different connotations.
It's like it's a Three Amigos. It's more than famous. I had to make that reference for somebody. I had to post that little video clip because kids these
Right.
days don't get it.
No, they just don't. So I am the CTO of Highwire Networks. I'm a lifelong cyber guy. I started doing cyber back in the Air Force, but we didn't call it cyber back then, and we just called it work. Building classified, unclassified networks in 1991, 92. And I've been doing it ever since. For a while there was really no cyber program, even when I got out. So I did firewalls, I did, antivirus, and just continued down that path. Dabbled in risk, built the TAC and Pen team for Sprint back in the day, got to meet some really interesting people in our industry doing that work, and have really done just about every cyber discipline over a course of about 30 years. And
All right.
now I get to wear a CTO hat, but I'm still a CISO at heart, and I love what I do.
Well, it's an interesting world. We always kind of talk about a little bit of history and how I always like to say, how things would have been different if we had some of the knowledge we have now back then. Although we are, in fact, relatively awful at, I think, taking knowledge forward. If you know what I'm saying.
I do, yeah. You mean learning from our past?
Yeah, right. Like cyber. Look, cyber every like 5 years feels like people go, "Holy cow, we've invented the wheel." And we're like, but I'm
That's
driving a
exactly, yeah.
car.
Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day that when we started this cyber journey, or when I did, it was all about prevention. We prevented things via firewall. We prevented things not very well with antivirus, but that was our attempt. And then the
Yeah,
pendulum swung, and people decided that detection and response was the better way, right? So we'll detect it really quick and we'll respond. And we found that's not the better way either. And where I see it, Raf, is the industry is moving back to center, which is the middle between detection and response and prevention. The more I prevent, the less I care about the data, right? I
right.
tell this a lot, if my controls do their job, then 80% of the noise, if not more, I can just prevent. And then I can really focus and hone in on that 20% that I need to detect the bad stuff. The
Yeah,
not the script kiddies, but the guys who understand how to circumvent controls. And now I want to watch them. I want to
yeah.
detect bad things and then immediately, right, go to that response phase.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a ton of sense, right? So it's an interesting proposition when we talk about the shift from prevention to detection and response. I feel like it happened in what do you think, 2016, 15, 14, somewhere in there?
I would argue, I forget what year that the Target breach happened, but I would argue it probably started then. And if you rewind to that, right, it was a HVAC vendor, and in the logs are the evidence that something funky happened. Their prevention tools missed it, right? And they didn't have somebody looking at the volume of data for the exception, or for that down the rabbit hole, right? That rabbit just went by and nobody saw it. It was there. It's in the logs. And so we
Right.
started to think about, okay, how do I parse through this terabytes and terabytes of data to do detections, right?
Yeah.
And then you saw this rise of these giant AI and ML, and we could go down that rabbit hole too. But I
Magic.
I forget when that was, what year it was, but I think it started in that model, or in that era, because you had a bunch of really big breaches that had big companies with big budgets, and they still got in.
That's fair. And that's the thing. Like, but I remember the very infamous I've told this story a bunch of times. I was coming down the escalator at the Gartner summit, their security summit in National Harbor, Maryland, and you come down that back escalator where,
Is that the
um,
Gaylord facility
yeah, to
there?
the Gaylord back
Yeah,
there. Yep,
it's a
yep.
great facility.
It's a beautiful one. And I remember Palo Alto had this like massive sign as you're coming down. And I'm not picking on you guys over at Palo, but it was just a weird shift he had made. And it said something like dinosaurs detect and respond, true security professionals prevent. And I was like, what?
Really? I
Yeah,
missed that one. I'm gonna
yeah,
go
that was
find a screenshot of that.
yeah. I think I might still have a picture of that somewhere on an old phone, but it was super interesting. I was thinking to myself, okay, so the wheel has come all the way back around. We're back to because you're right. Like we looked at, we did antivirus and we tried to prevent everything that we possibly could. So strategy became prevent all the things.
Right.
And, that worked super well. Um,
Clearly.
yeah, and it was interesting to me because we kind of matured into that mindset, as you said, like, okay, let's look to see what actually happened. It's probably happening right now, and it's probably happened 10 times
Right.
in the last as I slept. Okay, so cool. um and that I think because the marketing companies started, or marketing companies, security companies that had marketing departments, although some days those are the same thing, um started.
Look, if you don't market your program, you're not going to get funding. So you
Right,
need to be a
it's
marketer in
people.
this space.
Yeah, people started using the assume breach um, notion, and started seeing that in marketing materials everywhere. And I think that scared people. They're like, "Well, breaches are bad. I can't assume that. I can't go tell my organization that. Yeah, I'm just going to assume that we've been breached because I can't do that." And so the reaction was predictably negative.
Right. Most of those leaders don't like paying for insurance. And effectively, we're telling them it's coming, you're going to get breached. So we're your insurance against the bad thing, right? And I'll tell you a story. I work for a large telecom company in Overland Park, Kansas, and you probably can figure out
Yep.
who that is. And this was early in the cyber days, so I was there in '98, and we were chasing some interesting behaviors that we were seeing on the network. Um, and I had a couple of VPs of IT go, "Well, we've never been breached." And I looked at her and I said, "You just don't know it." And, "Oh, we're safe, we're secure." And I'm like, "No, you're not." And I said, "Here's why. My team, we were sanctioned to test our perimeter, and we did, and we got in, and as we got in, we went deeper, And I pulled out a stack of papers, and she says, "What's this?" I said, "This is all of your passwords from AD." And she's like,
Whoops.
"Oh." And she looks through it, and there's her password, and she's like, "Oh." And I'm like, "This is the problem. You guys are expecting the controls you have in place to be good enough, and they're not." And
But
without that moment, Raf, I couldn't get them to spend the money that I
yeah,
wanted
that's
to
fair.
protect. And so it was an insurance conversation.
But even if this is the thing, and I want, if you're listening now, or if you've got some hand in messaging this, I want to drill this into people's heads, like good enough, but when this is a timeline, right? Like
Sure it is.
that they're good enough may have been good enough at the time that it was good enough. It's like AppSec. When I was doing AppSec, you run the scanning tool, and you go poke at the
Yep.
app, and you're like, okay, this looks, I can't see anything wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it right now.
Yep.
30 seconds after it goes live into production, there is a critical bug found, or a new way of, God help us, doing SQL injection for the 160 billionth time. And
Right.
you're like, well, it was good enough 5 minutes ago, and
Right.
now it can't be good enough.
That's
right.
right.
So
Yeah.
this, what we do is a constant battle against, I think, two forces, right? The first one is the obvious one. It's innovation, because we're fighting, essentially we're fighting against innovation from, like, things continuously change on us,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
bad guys are creative, good guys are creative, everybody's creative. Like, we find new ways of being more efficient, we find new ways of stealing passwords, we find, we've got like 75 flavors of Linux, like, because everybody's got to
Right.
do their own thing. um
And each one's the
and the other
best.
thing that we're
Right. Yeah.
right the other thing that we're fighting, I think Mac OS is the best, but the other
There you go.
the other thing that we're fighting, I think, there is, we're fighting human nature, and people like, well, we just have to stop the criminals. Like, you can't. There have been criminals, there have been bad people since before people kept records, right? We know there were bad people
Right.
in the Pharaoh's time. We know there were people, bad people. Clearly, there were bad people in the time of Christ. We know, and there have been bad people ever since, and
Right.
there will
The first
continue to be bad
murder is
people until there
documented.
are no more people.
Right. The first murder in humankind was documented. So they're bad people.
Right.
And to that point, I read a report yesterday. And by the way, if for your listeners, I tell this to young people all the time: if you're not a voracious reader, don't come to this industry, because
Yeah.
to Raf's point a few minutes ago, it changes every day, and if you're not changing with it, you're left behind in a month. But yesterday, I saw a stat, Raf, that by 2025, so we're talking 2 years, cybercrime is going to be a $10 trillion business. And I thought the
With a
T was
T.
a little bit, no, it was a T. And I'm like, 2025, that's pretty soon. I don't even think it's at 100 billion yet. It's still, but the problem is still astronomical. There is this incentive for bad guys that we can't spend enough to keep up with. We just can't. Nobody can.
Yeah.
Our government can't. The FBI, I mean, I don't know if you saw it earlier this week or late last week, their email system got hammered.
Yeah.
The email got hammered. And these guys are spending, and they have some of the smartest people defending their networks. Sometimes, how can we even hope to compete? That sometimes I ask that question.
Well, look, I heard a great analogy about 15 years ago, and I'm going to keep using it because it's relevant. We build a building, we put fire suppression, sprinklers, fire prevention in, right? But you still have a fire hydrant outside, and we still have 911 to call when something
That's right.
happens. Like,
Yep.
this is the inevitable. I hate saying this, but one of Dan Conroy, who I used to work with a million years ago, one of the smartest guys I've known in this industry as a CISO, once said, like, breaches are the cost of doing business, and to say otherwise is either naive or stupid, and you got to pick which one you want to be. Like, look, it doesn't have to, they don't have to be cataclysmic,
Correct.
right? But I've
and
had
and
I've
knock
had my
on wood, they're
wallet
not.
stolen.
Right.
Right. Like you do everything you possibly can to do the best you can. Like, and sometimes, frankly, bleep happens. Like it just does. And
Sure it does.
it right. And it's not necessarily because you're malicious. It's not necessarily because you're dumb. It just like you're in the day-to-day course of doing things. How many times I remember when somebody tried to teach me how to be a developer, which didn't stick, obviously. But like, okay, hey, here's a piece of code I want you to go write. And what did I do? I went out on the internet and went, okay, I don't know how to do this, but I'm sure somebody on some web forum does.
And there's no
Ooh,
chat
copy
GPT
paste.
then. So you were,
That's
you
true.
had to do it
That's right.
yourself.
That's right. You had to do it yourself. That's scary. But yeah, like we had to try and fail, right? Human error happens. I mean, it does happen everywhere at every level.
Everything. Yep.
So that takes me to a question I wanted to ask you, because working for an organization that now, right, that capitalizes on the fact that we're learning from the collective badness that happens, and creating technology to service the broader industry that, like mechanization and scale are important. So that said, what are the lessons today that we should be learning that we're going to forget in 5 years?
Wow.
I know
don't
I hit you. I hit you before you finish your cup of coffee. So
I don't get stumped too often. That's a good one. Um, I think we're going to forget, and I keep beating this drum every time I get a chance to talk to people. We're going to forget that it does take a village. I'm not going to quote Hillary, but it takes a village to be good at cyber. It takes a village. And we're going to forget that because, there are some things coming. If you think about quantum computing, and again, you should read a lot. There's Google just put out a new research study on some of the the quantum computing they're working on, and 5 years from now, it's going to change us. But we're going to forget that there's no magic bullet, and you have to have a strategy, and you have to have defense in depth. Because I did a podcast last week with a friend of mine, a guy named Ed Amoroso. You know him, and we're
Yep.
talking, and he says his prediction in the next 5 years is it's going to be AI versus AI, and we're going to be on the sidelines watching, right, and responding to the AIs that are attacking each other. And I think that's interesting. There's a movie back in the '80s that talked about
Yeah.
that. Remember that?
Yeah. I don't like how that one ends.
I didn't either. Although they put in the code and everybody was magically saved.
Right.
But it's going to be interesting, and we have to focus on, back to your point. You build a building, you build a house, you've got doors and you've got walls and you got windows. And once you get past the perimeter, you've got motion sensors and you've got a dog and you've got a safe and you got a gun and you've got all this other stuff, because your controls, you need a strategy, right?
Yeah.
My core crown jewels are in a safe in the house. And to get there, you got to go through all of these controls to get there, right? And if any of them fail, you're either getting shot or you're getting bit, or both, right? And that
And I have a mean bite.
well, me too. I have a dog, and she probably just love you. But the point is still, you have to have that strategy. You have to have the end in mind, and then build backwards, right? Smarter people than me said that. Begin with the end in mind, and we're going to forget that because we're going to be watching these AI that the $10 trillion industry has built to attack us and take our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, you know, this is going to be a recurring theme that you guys listening probably are sick of me saying, and some of it's self-serving based on where I've been and what I do, but I think we are rapidly approaching, if we're not already there, and I can make a pretty good argument that I think we're already there, a place in time and evolution where security technology has and continues to evolve rapidly enough that um, well, okay, so you've got the evolution of security technology, you've got market forces, and I'll simply chalk those up as it's hard to hire, it's hard to retain, it's hard to
For
have
sure.
people, right? Good people, because it's not hard to find anybody, right? But it's hard to
Right.
find somebody that's worthwhile
Right.
and that will work hard, work as a team, work independently, all those things. And then frankly, the other market forces, which are just economics, right? Like you can look around and go, hey, look, we're not, we pretend we're doing great, but we're all sort of, as Fancy likes to say, a lot of us are house poor, right? You have
That's
a
right.
mortgage payment that makes you impossible to live. So, and companies are no different. So I think we are either rapidly approaching or docking at the dock of, why do companies attempt to do security operations, SOC operations on their own? And I get
On,
it.
did you say on
I
their
was part
own?
of it the first time. What's that?
Did you say do it on their own?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was part of it the first time, right? And I was on the provider side the first time around, where um, or late '90s, arguably early 2000s, the outsource your security to me model. Uh, it was an early attempt. It didn't do well. We missed like this whole thing called context. Um,
Of course, yeah.
right? There was a lot of this like throwing things over the wall. The company would simply say, "Hey, here's these tools. Like, go operate these." We'd go, cool, generic alert, go fix this," and it
Right.
didn't work. But I think we're past that. And when I look at the type of technology that's out there today, it is dramatically more difficult to implement, maintain, and continue to optimize and then operate in an effective manner. It is infinitely more difficult for all that than it was 7 years
For
ago.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So in all but and here's my premise, in all but like the Fortune 100, maybe 200, um why are companies trying to continue to build their own socks, Dave?
I think there's a couple things. One of them is a fear of letting their sensitive data out. There's this misconception that I'm going to bring a third party in, and now they're going to have access to the kingdom. And and while that there may be a grain of truth in that, the truth is any good sock worth their weight doesn't have time, right? Just doesn't have time to be combing through your SharePoint. And by the way, most good socks don't have access to it anyway. But there's this there's this idea that my people I trust more than the third party who's going to deliver a service. So there's that
Right.
fear. Right? That's probably part of it. Two is there's all of us who do security think we're really good at it and we can do it ourselves. It's a great intention, right? I love the approach, but if I were going to, this is going to sound a little extreme, but if my dog needed surgery, I know anatomy in a dog, but I can't fix it, right? I know how to walk a dog, train a dog. I know all the joints and the bones and all that stuff. I love pets, but I can't fix it. And there has to be a point where you go, these people, all they do as a vet is fix dogs. Let's take our dog there. And so there's that hubris, probably, which is the second piece. So you got fear, you got hubris. And I think maybe third is they don't understand the problem. They
Hmm.
don't understand that while they have some controls, they have no context outside of their small world, right? And frankly, some of them don't put the time in to have context outside of their small world, whatever and they may be a Fortune 50, but even then their small world, they're not thinking about what's happening outside of the US or outside of their state or outside of their city. And so I think there's that lack of understanding of what the
I
problem
think you nailed it, because this is the two sides of that context coin, right? The customer says, well, you don't know anything about my business. The provider says, you don't know anything about the rest of what's going on out there, right? And in reality, you need, like, both sides need. This is why the full, like, just pitch it over the wall, outsource it, la la la, it's all getting done for me, doesn't
you can't
never
do that
work.
either. That won't
Right.
work either.
So you need these. You need these models to be developed, which is what I think this whole, we've had a couple of shows on XDR, which I think this is all going, right? I think XDR is going into the direction that we really ultimately want to go, where as it's not a thing you can buy. It's an integrations play. It's a way of taking a bunch of stuff, making it make sense, and do stuff as a result of something. As, like, if this happens, then do this, and then that,
coding.
right?
You're coding.
Right. It's context aware security operations on both sides of that coin, knowing what's happening in the broader industry. Because I love the fact that we look back in the late 90s, the when ISS and had a SOC and all that, right?
Yeah, most people don't know who they are, but they were a thing back in the day.
They were a thing. Internet security systems, look it up. But they had context. They could see things because they had 1,000 customers, 2,000, 10, whatever that number was.
Right.
And they saw, like, hey, there's this weird thing that happened over here. That they got breached as a result. Well, I see signs of it over here. Well, what does that mean? And the customer would never see it until it's already at your door, right? This is kind of like the neighborhood watch website, where you get to or like Nextdoor now, but Nextdoor has turned into something weird. But like where you go say, hey, neighbor, is there somebody walking around checking the handles on all the cars out there?
Right.
And the reality is,
hey, we just saw that white panel van. Can somebody get their license?
Right, exactly. And maybe it's just somebody driving through, selling candy, although that's
delivering for Amazon.
That's right. They're delivering. That's right. It's a surprise Amazon delivery, or maybe it's somebody looking to snatch your kids. Like, you got to know.
Right.
But you're not, if you're waiting for it, right? If you're waiting for it to show up at your door, it's too late.
That's right.
And I think that's where I think this is the thing that so from what I'm looking at, like, what are we going to forget in 5 years? I think we're going to forget the fact that we've done this before. We've done the detect and respond model. At least we tried. But we ignored context because it was too. I think either because we were stupid, maybe, or because it was too hard. And I give you that it was difficult back then. It's not, the technology wasn't there. It still is, but the tech is better.
I agree. My point is the volume of data is driving context to be a little bit more complicated. However, the other side of that coin is the volume of data is making context easier. So there's a balance there, right? The more data I have about an IP or a location or a behavior, and I see it in plenty of places, the context becomes easier. The challenge is, back to target, is sifting through all the noise to get to the context you need to make a better decision.
That's right. So now we've got, I think now that we've finally gotten past that, like, AI is magic, we're finally understanding the reality of, hey, it's just all algorithms, and it's okay to admit that, right? Because algorithms are fantastic. They can teach us things, they can learn things, and they can show us things. But algorithms can have implicit bias. They can have inherent blind spots that the people that program them use. So
that's right.
It doesn't magically solve security.
Right? Just ask ChatGPT who won the election.
Yeah.
Somehow we had a president that no one ever heard of.
It's funny. We did a live show on that, and we did some really like said, well, what are the top 5, I think, security vendors? And it was like Symantec, McAfee, and I'm going, huh? Like, did we fall into a time warp? Like, hey, what year are you in?
That's right. Yeah.
Is it 1998 again?
Yeah. It was an arms race for those two.
Yeah, it was. Good. It was a great race to the bottom. All right, so let's we'll get about 5 minutes, right? So because conversation always goes too fast. What do you? Let me ask you another tough one. Where's our big blind spot right now, and what can we do to fix it?
Oh, what's our blind spot?
I'm full of easy ones this morning.
You are, man. You told me it was going to be easier than this. I don't think I'm coming back again. Of course, after my bad answers, I might not get invited anyway. So there we go.
Next time we'll try it later in the day with bourbon.
There we go. I think there's a couple things that I might answer that question. I think part of it is, while security practitioners out there are painfully aware of who the top adversaries are in the world, there's still this blind spot for most people. The last month, the balloon that came across the U.S., that was news. It came out of China. China's bad. But what they talk about is, China's advanced fighter jet looks just like ours. Right?
It's amazing.
It is amazing. These technologies that we have and depend on, they're made in China. So do we really want to poke that bear? And so I think there's a blind spot with regard to where we get stuff, and we want to look past the fact that some of the things we get and we depend on in life are coming from places that are diametrically opposed to us and want to end our existence.
Yeah, that is,
and that's a rabbit hole by itself. And that's a rabbit hole by itself. So I think we turn a blind eye to the behaviors, right? And I don't know how we get past that. I just don't.
That's an interesting one. Because we've had this was the this is a meme that was posted. It's like, hey, we're all freaking out about a surveillance balloon floating over at 40,000 feet over the U.S. Meanwhile, we're all telling TikTok all of our secrets.
Right.
Newsflash, those things are going to the same place.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Both things are surveilling you. It's like I've had so there is, I think what we're getting at here, and I agree with you. Like the blind spot for me, and see if this resonates. The blind spot for me is we tend to say, and the collective we tend to say, you should follow the rules. These are really good because you don't get it. Don't worry, I'm not going to fall victim to this. Oh crap! I clicked an email that looked real. Oh shoot! I'm the source of the next BitLocker infection. It's like, hold on. And there's a bit of, I think arrogance is the word. There's parts of the industry that, whether you're a technology vendor, whether you're an enterprise CISO, whether you're whatever, there's an arrogance about parts of this industry, and maybe almost like a bravado, like, hey, I'm not going to get popped. I'm going to be fine. Nobody's going to hack me. Like my tech stops 100% of known and unknown forever and ever. Amen.
It's the same hubris that says I'm going to do it myself.
Right. Yes. Right? It's that person that's like, yeah, I can change out my own head gasket. No problem. Like, wait, where do I start? Okay. This YouTube video didn't tell me what to do when,
right. When it doesn't work right.
Yeah, right. I think that is a lesson in humility that this industry learns over and over and over and over over, and it doesn't stick. Like what is it going to take, David?
I hesitate to even answer that question. I don't know what it's going to take. And the models I've thought through, what it's going to take is going to be, very painful for all of us. And I hope that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this, I don't know. I don't see the new, look, no offense to anybody that's part of this, but I don't see the new generations taking lessons well from us old, been there, done that folks.
No, they don't.
Like, kids, we've survived this. We were there before this thing had a name.
Right.
There are, whether you're talking about world history or cyber, not taking the lessons that we should have learned is killing us. It's freaking killing us. Like, you can go to any major security vendor fair and look at all the new tools that look just like all the old tools, but with new colors, a new dashboard, and a new slogan.
Yeah, for your listeners, right? For your listeners out there, I talk about this a lot, and I know we're bumping up on our time. If you're like me, like Raf, and you've been doing this a long time, and at some point we're going to be done, we have to equip that next generation of leader in cyber, right? And it can't be those people who go, I don't care about privacy. I post everything about me. I do this, I do that. It's got to be people who are thinking about protecting my data and your data, right? When I'm 70, I want people thinking about, oh, he's 70. His data is still just as important as it was when he was 30. And a lot of the generation behind us, Raf, don't care about privacy. And so I don't want them making policy decisions about you and I. So
yeah,
the whole point to this audience is, if you're at a position in life where you can start mentoring people, if you're not, please do, right? It doesn't take a ton of work, but when you find a couple of gems out there that you can polish and cut and shape and mold and help them get to where you are. And by the way, I always ask them whenever somebody says, hey, can you spend some time? Like, yeah, great. But I want you to give back at some point. I want you to do this same thing that we're about to do for someone else. We have to pay it forward. And if we're not, if the security leaders on your podcast or listening in aren't doing that, I always encourage people, find one, start with one. It's rewarding. The other thing is, you learn as much. I learn as much from those young kids, and I call them kids, but they're 20 somethings, as they learn from me. So it's a great way to try to stay current with some stuff that maybe you haven't thought of, but more importantly, you get to help shape them. And hopefully when I'm done with this industry, someone will be driving policy decisions that are good for all of us, and not, not policy decisions that just say, oh, I don't care about my privacy. It's okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good place to end it, David. Thank you for spending some time this morning.
I love doing this. So happy to be here.
We'll do more of these. I'm starting to build up for this year. I'm starting to build up a collection of folks that we're just going to have a couple times, because these topics, it's not that they're evergreen. It's not only that they're evergreen, but that the way that they present, I feel like it's just, you can't do this once. This is an evolving conversation. And so, yeah, that's a good one. Thanks, man. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
All right, folks, hey, before you hang up or stop or whatever you're doing, take just a second, because do you know somebody that wants to be on this podcast? Do you think that you've got somebody out there that should be on this podcast? We're always entertaining guests. Don't do a lot of self-aggrandizing or product pitching, but would love to have some interesting topics that maybe we haven't covered yet, or maybe that it's time to cover again because they've evolved. So if you've got an idea, hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, or get into the LinkedIn group and post a question or a request there, and we'll get to you. Would love to make that happen. So for myself and David, thanks for listening, you guys. This has been another episode of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast, and we'll get back to you next time, another place on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole